Hi, this is Kevin Conroy, and you're listening to the Geekcast Radio Network, and I am the goddamn Batman.
Hello and welcome to Altered Geek Unlimited, episode 13. I'm your host, Steve Megatron Phillips, and joining me this week is not Boothninja Powers. It is...
MOVIEREVOLT Dan.
Welcome back.
How are you?
Good. You?
I am doing well. I am pinch hitting once again for Powers, who is on special assignment, so...
I wonder what that assignment is. We'll have to get Coulsen off him.
Yes, that is the mystery of Altered Geek, finding out exactly, where Powers came back from. So.
Yeah. So, do a little bit of housekeeping right off the bat here. We have officially started the Top 100 Animated Film Countdown.
Yeah, we have. We've done episode 52, which was 100 to 81.
Yes.
So, if I did my math correctly, thank God. Yeah. And when is that going to be released?
The original plan was this week. However, due to trying to make sure that it's perfectly edited, we'll probably release it next week, so there'll be an extra buffer in between. Just this week anyway, hopefully. Yeah, that's how that'll work. So that'll be released the next week. Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, that way we can make sure that the audio is the best possible we can have throughout the whole thing. Which, it's a good thing we do the local records as well, in addition to the overall record. So...
Yeah, Skype was not our friend for many reasons. I don't know. But yeah, so that way, luckily we're taking a little bit extra time to make the sound great as possible. But yeah, it was a lot of fun doing that episode. A lot of surprises just to start off with. A lot of movies that I think some people will be a little angry that they're on there. Some people might just be a little happy and surprised. But definitely check that out, and you'll looking forward to seeing what people think. So.
Yeah, I definitely look forward to seeing what people think on that as well. It got a little interesting throughout the first 20 that showed up. Obviously, some of us thought some should be higher than others, of course, after a particular incident, which I'm not going to get into until people actually get to hear it. We will... I was kind of thinking after that one anyway that that whole argument was kind of a waste in a sense, being that something better came along right down the list that should have been higher than that other one. In fact, I would have been fine if the one didn't show up after the fact, in favor of the part of the other one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing about doing it the way we do it is you're getting a lot of our natural reactions. The only person that knows the entire list is Kevin, Optimus Solo, Thompson. So myself, Steve, and Mike, we're kind of just reacting along with you. So you're going to hear a lot of us just kind of, a lot of them we ourselves aren't really happy with or really happy with. And just doing that first part, you just notice how different all of our tastes are because we all come at it in different, with different tastes and different movies that we want to see on that list. And I think right from the get-go, we're going to see that. And it makes it for more fun when you come into that project like this with people with a variety of different backgrounds, because it just shows you, no matter what you do, you always have biases, but biases, it's just kind of natural. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I think it's an opportunity to kind of learn more about different takes and different opinions and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I there were points that you could definitely see some of the personal biases jumping in there, despite the fact that everybody even voted on the whole thing. So, bias or not, that's where they showed up. Fairly.
And if you look at the amount of people that were in this list, this is Geekcast Radio's list, of course, but there were if you just counted the network, all the network members, along with everyone else that contributed, we had like equal say. Like, so this is, we didn't dominate this list with just Geekcast Radio members doing it. There's a variety of different people who all put in, their own list. So it's not, we try to eliminate those biases, but it's just, I think it's somewhat just natural. And I think anyways, like any list is going to be biased in some way. But I think for the most part, it was cool just to see, because you'll see in the first episode at least, a huge variety of different films. Like we talked about, from any different types of animation, different types of mediums, like companies and whatnot. And that's been kind of the cool thing, seeing what companies are going to dominate more than the other ones. So
yes. So definitely hope that we enticed you just a little bit more. Yes. So hopefully we enticed you a little bit more to check this out. So did you want to get into some media news?
Yeah, let's dive headfirst into it.
Yes, I know some of this almost is kind of borderline MWire Weekly, but it's heavy in one particular area, which is DC or Warner Brothers Entertainment. Starting with Batman.
Always a good place to start.
Yes, something that's always near and dear to me. Yes, starting with Batman vs. Superman, the Batmobile to resemble an old Cadillac is what the current rumor that's floating around.
That's interesting. I mean, that's always a big question, what the Batmobile is going to look like. So, if it's like an old Cadillac, that almost makes me think of almost like the classic, or the 1989 Batmobile a little bit. Maybe, depending on how they do it. Because I guess they're going more so not the more realistic route, but I don't know. I'm curious, like, what it's going to... It seems odd, like an odd choice, but having a gigantic Batmobile Cadillac. I think, isn't that kind of like the Justice League Batmobile? Doesn't that kind of look like a Cadillac? I could be remembering incorrectly.
It's almost kind of like the Batman the Animated Series one.
Okay.
Because the Justice League one had more of the comic kind of points, and had the kind of bat symbol head in the center of it, whereas it took me a second to actually see this, and I'll include the links in the show notes. There was a Cadillac 16 concept car that was introduced in 2003, which they kind of stated could be the Batmobile, and it's kind of got the same basic shape as that. So I mean, I would be fine with that, honestly.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. What is your favorite Batmobile? I guess that's a good question.
I actually prefer I really like the 89 as far as like the film verse. As far as other media, I like the 66 one, but I really like the Batman the Animated Series Batmobile the best.
Nice, yeah. I do like the 1989 one. That's probably my favorite. I also really like the Tumbler too, just because it fits into that Nolanverse really well. If Batman were to have an actual Batmobile in real life, I would assume it's something like the Tumbler, or like the huge tank from Dark Knight Returns is a favorite of mine too. But I think if I were going to point one specifically, it would be the 89 Batman, just because I don't know. To me, that's one that's been influencing Batmobiles ever since. Like, it's always like almost all Batmobiles since then have been a different take on that one. I mean, there have been different variations, but I think it set the standard for quite a while.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that kind of around that time just the 89 and the Frank Miller Batman kind of changed everything as far as the Dark Knight's concerned, and
Yeah, definitely.
the Tumblr definitely was a callback to the Dark Knight Returns comic, as well as aspects of the Dark Knight Rises was kind of the same. There were some vibes in there of that. So, I mean, it's definitely a lot of inspiration's been drawn from the two over the years.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not really sure what it looks like in current comics, but I always felt like the ones in live action are the one. It's just I think better. You get a better sense of the Batmobile more so in live action than in comics. I guess comic fans may disagree with me, but just looking at the pictures on the link that you provided, it almost seems like it could look like just like a normal car in a way, depending on how they do it, which would be interesting. Like almost like it would blend in just like as a normal vehicle, maybe with a little bit of alterations here and there. So it may be even more practical than like the Tumblr. So I guess, and I could see that fitting into the world of Man of Steel. But my one question too is like, are they going with the logo, or will there be no logo? You know, but a lot of questions. It's funny with like, you know, comic book movies, all the little bits and pieces that, you know, we wonder about, from the suits to the cars, you know, to the casting. There's all these little things that we, you know, all these little tidbits that we get. So I'm sure we'll get more and more as we get closer and closer.
I'm sure they'll at some point add aesthetics to it anyway that'll kind of give it that bat look. Whether it be
let them
fins or some extra kind of wheel coverage or whatever.
As long as it doesn't look like the Batmobile from Batman and Robin, I'll be happy.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't look like that, I'll be happy. The current Batmobile is kind of he kind of has more than one in the New 52 comics.
Interesting.
He has the 89 Batmobile in the Batcave. He has a couple of kind of different car-like ones. He also has kind of like an armored, almost kind of rendition of what's shown here. Like it's got fins and a little bit of armor added to it, but it's kind of the same basic idea.
That is pretty cool. Yeah. I guess the question too is, will it be a hybrid? I mean, you know, will Batman be environmentally conscious? I guess, but
Probably not.
no, it's probably going to be a gas guzzling, like, you know, gets 13 miles per gallon type of car. But you know, he's Batman; he can afford it. So
Yes. Continuing on that road, I don't know if you watched the or have seen the Beware the Batman.
I have not had a chance to check it out yet.
That is actually kind of an interesting series. It's all CG. I was kind of skeptical when it first came out. I wasn't quite sure what to expect. However, it's kind of come along its own way, and they've kind of shied away from using his typical rogues gallery like Riddler, Penguin, Joker, Freeze, Ivy, you know, Clayface, all those kind of the normal ones that he fights against pretty much on everything. So they have like Professor Pig, Anarchy, more of the obscure villains that he normally wouldn't fight. And I think they have like Lady Shiva and some other ones. They have the League of Assassins in there, and then hinted at the fact that Ra's al Ghul is somewhere in there. But it's definitely interesting. The difference that they've taken on this, and Alfred's not the feeble old man. He's like a almost like a MI6 agent.
So it's like James Bond meets the butler.
Basically.
Nice.
So it's quite interesting to watch. But there was kind of an upheaval online earlier this week where people thought that the show was canceled because Cartoon Network issued some kind of a statement saying that is no longer on our air. DC Nation will continue on Saturday mornings with new exclusive shorts and a full hour of encore episodes of Teen Titans Go. So everybody was kind of like, oh, great, Cartoon Network ruined it again. They canceled another superhero show or another revival show because in the past they've killed the Thundercats revival. They've killed the Green Lantern animated series. They've killed Young Justice. So it's kind of in their track record to kill shows before they really get started.
Yeah, I guess they're like the Fox of cable.
Anymore they are.
Yeah.
But they eventually issued something stating that, or the voice even kind of Batman said that new episodes would appear in January, which is kind of strange that they wouldn't come right out and say it, or if they're just trying to curb and save face at this point.
Yeah, that is. I mean, to abruptly stop producing something or putting it on your schedule does seem a little odd. And I was reading the article, and apparently it wasn't getting great ratings. It was getting like fewer people are watching that than the new Teen Titans Go, which is odd. You just assume if it's a Batman cartoon, people are gonna watch it, but they haven't been as much. So, do you think the fact that they aren't using like the common villains is hurting people from watching it, or do you think it's just people don't like to see Batman in CG? Why do you think people aren't like gravitating towards that?
I think it's kind of a combination of both. I think it's kind of hard to swallow the CG thing. And they also they changed from the making his suit gray and gray and black or gray and dark blue. It's all jet black, almost like the '89 Batman. And they don't have any of the typical Robins or Nightwing or anything like that. They have Katana, who is basically his sidekick, but they kind of reveal why she's important in the show. But I think that's part of it, that people just aren't familiar with this kind of Batman. It's supposed to be kind of like an early on Batman, but a different continuity. Not that much unlike any of the other ones that have come out. But I also think that it's a lot to do with the fact that the villains, because that was my main pet peeve before I started watching it. I was going to watch it regardless because it's Batman, no matter what I said. But a lot of the villains, I was kind of like, I don't really care. I didn't like Professor Pig. I didn't like Professor Pig and Mr. Toad. I didn't like. They had a couple of Villain of the Week things going on. They have Simon Stagg, who's kind of like a rich billionaire type guy that owns his own company, but he's a scumbag. Which that's kind of the typical thing. Anarchy's kind of interesting in the show. They, like I said, they started to reveal Ra's al Ghul before it got cut off. So that was like the really only tie to a previous villain that they've actually made in the show, and I think it has the potential to get good because they're kind of finally starting getting the hang of what they're trying to accomplish. But I think that it didn't help things that it took 11 episodes to get there.
Yeah. I find it weird. I feel like I don't know, like growing up, I remember growing up in the 90s, I always felt like comic book cartoon series went on forever, like the, Batman or Spider-Man or X-Men. They went on for like 7 years, and now it seems like more than 2, and then they're done and they're doing something new and they're changing it around. I was a big fan of the Avengers assembled cartoon, and then they canceled that, and they went to a different production company altogether. So it just seems like there's just constant turnover, even in Marvel or DC with these cartoons. You don't really see many that are lasting the 4, 5, 6 years anymore. At least when it comes to superhero cartoons, they're you get a couple seasons, maybe 3 at the most. I don't know how many Batman the Brave and the Bold was around, but we're not seeing that 7 years or 8 years cartoon series for comic books anymore.
I think that's almost for 2 different reasons, maybe even 3. The studios don't seem to really understand what people gravitate towards anymore. I think it's part of it. Another part of it is that just about every series that's out is CG. Like, there's no regularly animated shows anymore for the most part. It's all CG or computer done, even if it's not like the kind of 3D looking character or shows or whatever, but there's not a bit of it is done the old fashioned way.
Yeah, you don't really get much hand drawn animation anymore. I don't know about the Avengers cartoon. I know it's not like the CG format like Brave and the Bold, but I don't think it's like hand drawn animation. But I can't say that for sure.
I mean, I don't think they need to do the kind of 3D CGI type of animation for every show, because honestly, I think that would be more costly than having them do it the other way. I mean, I don't know, but
I would assume, I don't know, like hand drawn animation can be expensive because just the amount of people that you need, it takes a lot longer to do it. Usually, if you're doing something more so CG, like you can do it on the cheap a little bit. I mean, I think if you did a proper CG series, it might be a little bit more expensive, but just your turnover rate is like super quick. Like, look at something like South Park; they do their episodes in 6 days. They're notorious for doing that just because it's, with their animation style, they kind of have it down pat by this point. So it's interesting to say the least. But it does seem like they keep adjusting. Like you would, whatever. Like the movies, I think they have them in place, and then the movies come out and they change things a little bit, so they go back and they reset things. But yeah, it's strange. But I personally have not watched a lot of the superhero cartoons recently, and for me, I get CG for certain cartoons. Like I think a CG Green Lantern series makes sense with it existing in like space and these exotic worlds and stuff like that. I can get that, but I don't know, something about CG and Batman just didn't flow well with me, and I think that seems to be the case for a lot of people since it's not doing that well. So I don't know, maybe they'll go back. I know I really wish this Justice League would come back. I really miss that cartoon. I mean, it's on, you can get it on Netflix and stuff, but I don't know, ever since then we just haven't had something that has been at that level, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, Young Justice seemed to be kind of that level, but it didn't entice me as much as the Bruce Timm DC animated universe. Yeah. I think that's the last time. I think during that era, and I think when Justice League ended, I think that was pretty much the end of the animated DC stuff. I'm not saying that Brave and the Bold and the Batman weren't good, but they, I think that they kind of, people were already kind of done because they had already told the better stories that just kind of happened to be told. Yeah, it wasn't that they, absolutely wrote the definitive, but it's kind of hard to beat that at this point.
True.
And they also killed Saturday morning cartoons.
Yeah. I mean, we are kind of living in a generation where the day of the week and the time you watch television doesn't really matter anymore. We are the get it when we want it type of generation where, we have DVR, we have Netflix, we have streaming. So I think networks are seeing that, and we don't have those specific block of times anymore. I do miss Saturday morning cartoons. I mean, sometimes I just want to watch them, so I'll watch them. And I'm like, wait, there aren't any on TV. Like, whatever happened to Fox Kids or, ABC Kids, like one Saturday morning and all that stuff. They don't really exist anymore. It's just kind of sad.
Yeah, I mean, that was really the only thing that had me enticed for Saturday mornings. Even now, I have Beware the Batman and the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's really the only two things I look forward to. I mean, other than the reruns of Justice League and Justice League Unlimited that are on Saturday mornings for the hour before Beware the Batman comes on Cartoon Network. So, I have a couple hours to watch stuff, but some of it's old and some of it, like 2 episodes are new, but I end up watching more of the old stuff. But it's kind of, like you said, kind of hit or miss, and it's not like what it used to be.
Yeah. And any other interesting news stories out there?
I mean, there was that kind of tidbit of the Warner Brothers president dodging questions on Wonder Woman appearing in Batman vs. Superman.
Yeah, I heard that. I mean, I heard that rumor. I could see it making sense. I know a lot of people saying maybe like Batman's girlfriend would actually be, Wonder Woman or something like that. I don't know. The fact that they're dodging it makes me think that she's going to be, because I would assume if she's not, they would just go say, hey, she's not going to be in it. But for them to kind of leave it open and make us question and wonder, about Wonder Woman, it makes me think that maybe there's a shot that there'll be a cameo, or maybe like, I remember with Marvel, they would do things and they'll be talking, and in the background there would be like a news story. Maybe that happens when they're in the background. You see them talking about something regarding Wonder Woman, or like discovery of her island or something like that. But I think that would be awesome. I really, really hope that DC does expand their cinematic universe even too, and I would love to see Wonder Woman actually get her own movie, or at least be part of the Justice League. I think we all want that Justice League movie, and hopefully it happens. I mean, if Batman vs. Superman works out, it would make sense just to kind of bring in Wonder Woman. She's she is part of that big three.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think it's kind of, I think it's kind of messed up. I mean, granted, the TV show that they were trying to do a couple years back didn't look all that enticing, but I don't think that they had the right team behind it either, or the right studio or company.
Yeah.
But I think that it's about time that they expand beyond just having Batman and Superman in film. Yes. I mean, I know Green Lantern flopped, but that was more due to the writing than anything else.
Yeah, that was just a poorly made movie all around.
I mean, aesthetically it was good, but
yeah,
other than that,
they have to
fell
be
flat.
DC has to be kicking themselves that they never went through with that Joss Whedon made Wonder Woman series when they had the chance. That could have been huge. But yeah, it'd be cool. I mean, the question is like, who would play her? And I know you guys went back and forth with like what person could play Wonder Woman. I think you guys agreed that probably like a no name, or someone would not, like someone like a smaller star would probably be the best. But yeah, I hope that they do. Maybe they'll do like an end credit scene. I don't know if they're going to try to do their own, how they're going to expand that universe, what their plans are. To me, it seems like DC doesn't have a set plan at this point. Unlike Marvel, which has their Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3. For DC, it's almost like a wait and see. We'll see how this goes. If it does well, then we'll go from there.
It almost seems like DC and Warner Brothers has too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yes, that's very true.
It's that one wants to control the other and tell the other how this should be done, when what they really should be doing is getting a team that actually knows about these characters, knows how to make them, to craft this entire thing into a cinematic universe, and put their money where their mouth is, instead of trying to constantly kind of backpedal and run each other over.
Exactly. I mean, get the team that did the Wonder Woman direct-to-DVD movie. That was great. You can so translate that into a movie in itself, and it would be fantastic. that's a good point. I know we had there was a comment on the last episode you did with Mike about, Marvel being owned by Disney. I feel with that, like, Disney kind of gets out of Marvel's way and lets Marvel do what they want to do, and they just support them when they need to. But I always feel like Mike Blanchard brings this up a lot about how Warner Brothers, I think, just doesn't respect the comic book side of DC and just thinks that, they're going to do things our way. We know what to do. So they don't listen to those comic book writers. They don't really bring in a lot of those minds like Marvel does. And they're stuck with, sticking to Batman. And every time they try to expand with that, you have like a Catwoman disaster or a Green Lantern disaster because they don't bring in people who know those characters and can do them justice.
I mean, I don't understand why. I mean, and that's kind of we can go into this in depth later on in another episode, but it's like they pan the comic book writers, even though they have the most cohesive and more in-depth background of the characters. Like they know how to craft the character because they understand them and can come up with something that's more original than when they hire these guys that are just fans of it or were fans of it growing up or have no idea what the heck it was.
Just like your director for hire who's just doing it because he wants a job.
Yeah, and that's, I think, part of the mistake. They should be, rather than fighting each other, they should be embracing what they have under their flag, similar to Disney. Just kind of saying, okay, Marvel, you've been doing this, you've been knocking it out of the park, just do what you're doing, and we'll stand back here and just print you money.
Exactly, because I mean, at this point, Marvel is having better success with their movies than Disney is. Disney had a huge flop with Lone Ranger, and Marvel was huge with Iron Man 3, and it looks like Thor 2 is going to do even not as good as Iron Man 3, but it's going to do well. So I think Disney's like, you know what? I think we need to sit back and listen to them because they seem to know what they're doing better than us sometimes, which is interesting. But I guess it's wait and see. We'll see how it goes. Maybe DC will right the ship, and we'll finally get our Wonder Woman movie, our Justice League movie. I think Warner Brothers needs it to begin with. After losing Harry Potter and a lot of other franchises, they're scratching at the bit to try to keep their flagpoles going. So
yeah, definitely.
I think Warner Brothers needs DC more than DC needs Warner Brothers. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. I can totally agree with that. And then I think the last bit that I'll talk about bring up as far as the film stuff, because the rest of it you guys can cover on MR Weekly, based on whatever you guys want to talk about. There's Tim Burton wants to direct a Beetlejuice 2.
Are you a fan of Beetlejuice?
I am a quasi fan. I liked the first one. I'm not totally behind the idea of doing a second one, but I'm not against it if they can get the people back that actually played the parts. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure Michael Keaton. I mean, I don't know. I'm not like you. I'm not a huge Beetlejuice is not one of those movies that I would say it's at all one of my favorite movies. I do recognize it as one of Tim Burton's better films, but I don't know. Tim Burton lately is not the director that made Beetlejuice 20 some years ago. He's a different person. I just think he would. I don't know if he would ruin it, but I don't know. I don't see him going back and doing that character justice anymore. He just doesn't seem like a director that is all that interested in creating characters. He's more interested in just technology and just doing random things, with things like Alice in Wonderland. And I don't know, he hasn't made a good. I shouldn't say that because he did Frankenweenie last year, which I thought was pretty decent. But for the most part, his movies have been pretty bad. But I don't know. Maybe going back to an old friend like Beetlejuice would be good for him. But I don't know. I wouldn't be against it, but it's not something I'm wishing for by any means.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against it, and I'm not saying that it should happen. But if it were to happen, then I mean, I don't think he should write it.
True.
Yes. I think it's fine if he directs it, so long as other people write it to try and somewhat further the story, based on the fact that it's been well over 20-some years.
Yeah. And as long as,
one.
you keep Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice and you don't just like throw Johnny Depp in there for no apparent reason.
Yeah, I mean, I know Michael Keaton really wants to come back and play that part.
Yeah, and I love Michael Keaton, so I would be all for it, because I don't know, he's kind of having a little bit of a resurgence recently in the last few years, but I know like after like Batman, the 90s weren't that great to him, but he's really hilarious, and I know people forget that, you know, in the 80s he had a lot of great comedies, and I would love to see him kind of go back to that again. So
yeah, definitely. And he had, you know, like the cop movie in the 2000s with Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, The Other Guys. He was hilarious in that, and he was in Toy Story 3 as Ken, and he gave a great performance. So yeah, I'm a big. Actually, it's funny we're talking about Michael Keaton, because I'm a fan of the show New Girl, and he played a pretty big role in the latest episode. So it's just kind of hilarious because that we're bringing him up now, and he was such a big part of that show. But that's just a random bit. But yeah, I don't know. Well, again, so bottom line for me is like, if it happens, great. I'm not all that worried about it either way.
Yeah, and I do know that he is in the RoboCop remake. So
oh yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he's one of the guys in the corporation.
Nice.
So yeah, I know he's kind of I think he plays a hard ass in the movie, so that's going to be something nice to kind of see him play something serious too that isn't. I don't think the film will be bad. I don't think it'll be great. Nothing that's remade is as good as the original, despite I mean, for the most part. I mean, technologically it's better, but it's kind of hard to change things.
Yeah, there are. I can't. I mean, off the top of my head, I can't really think of. I mean, there are occasions that I think a remake. Sometimes a remake's better, but yeah, in most occasions that's not the case. But,
like I like the Total Recall, the remake.
Yeah.
Despite the fact it's not Arnold, and despite the fact that some of it has changed, I like them both on their own separately. Whereas like Willy Wonka and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I prefer the original.
Oh, definitely. I wasn't really a big fan of the Total. I really wasn't really a big fan of either of those remakes, but Willy Wonka is the original is a million times better than the Tim Burton interpretation of the. Even though the Tim Burton interpretation is closer to the book, Gene Wilder in that role trumps Johnny Depp any day of the week.
Oh yeah, hands down, and that's kind of my point with the whole the remakes. I mean, it's hit or miss, but it's for the most part the original trumps the remake.
Yeah, I would say so. I think the batting average for the original tends to be higher than that of the remake, so I would agree with that completely.
So I guess we'll get into some listener feedback.
Okay, sounds good.
We have Ryan Hannity. He says, I would love to see a Marvel TV show like Punisher, as long as it's on cable or a paid network like HBO.
Yeah, I mean, that would be cool. I mean, I don't know if it would happen. I think for some reason they've been trying to do Punisher. We've had 3 movies, and it's I do like the Thomas Jane Punisher movie. It's not the greatest, but that is one character that would work maybe better in television than in a film. Yeah, on HBO you certainly would be able to go, a lot darker than you would on basic cable or network television. So that would be cool. I don't see it happening just because of the Disney factor. I don't see them allowing their character on HBO, but you never know. Sometimes with licensing deals, it'll happen. But
yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of a lot of Marvel stuff. I'm more of a DC guy myself, as I've stated in the past. But I wouldn't object to it being made. I actually am not familiar with any of the 3 films. Or
yeah, and speaking of Punisher, isn't the Pull Bag, the comic book podcast for Geekcast Radio, aren't they doing a special Punisher month or something this month?
Yeah, I want to say it's in December that they're pulling that off, like November to December.
Oh yeah, so for Ryan Hannity, you might want to check that out because that'll be coming shortly. So if you're a big Punisher fan, that might be something you'd be interested in.
Yeah, definitely. Dragon O commented on the Beast Wars Dark Glass project. He says it looks like it could be awesome, and then he asked when it might be released. Currently, and I kind of answered this in the message area too, but currently it's slated for a 2016 release, only for the fact that I think there's 3 guys, maybe 4, doing the overall models and textures and all that kind of stuff, and then they're actually having to animate it themselves on some of them have a little bit archaic machines, so now we're taking donations to try and help them upgrade so that they can get this out faster. But that's what they're shooting for anyway. I don't know if it'll actually be out by then. I'm hoping so, because we've had the voice track done since 2010.
Oh really?
Because I helped cast everybody in that and put out the auditions and all that stuff, and we actually got all the lines back in by the beginning of 2011, and yeah, it was kind of I think we had 60 to 70 people audition between all the roles.
Oh wow! So are you in that as well?
Yes. I myself went through the same audition process, but I could not choose myself by default. I had to go by the overall pool of vocals that were throughout it. Based on the fact that I would have been biased, being that I'm the voice director. So I had the other executive producer trump me on that area. So we actually got 2 guys that are actually doing voice acting and acting stuff for a living now in that. But Kevin Optimus Solo is actually depth charge
Interesting.
in that project. I myself am Beast Wars Megatron. I also auditioned for Rhinox and Waspinator, as well as a couple hidden roles that nobody will know until it's released. But we found a guy that sounds just like 2 of the ones that I auditioned for. One of them that was unknown, and one of them being Rhinox, which I auditioned for as well. They just actually replaced the other guy recently on that one. And Waspinator, I got beat by a actual professional voice actor.
Well, no shame in that.
No shame in that. It was it was kind of a toss-up anyway. But this guy was more in tune with the regular vocal performance of this particular voice actor, so he got 2 out of the 4 voices this guy does for the show. So I mean, it's an interesting project to say the least. But that's the latest that we're hoping it comes out.
That's cool. After you guys talked about it, I was taking a look, but yeah, it's rather impressive, like just the scope of that project. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that coming out.
Yes, definitely. It's the goal with the story is to try and bridge the gap from events that happen in Nemesis Part 1 and 2 that are unexplained. Like how the original Dinobot's memories come to rest in the clone of Dinobot, despite them not actually being in him. And then the virus issue on Beast Machines that gets answered in this as well.
Nice.
So it's a couple continuity holes that we're plugging in this show as well. So
so you're doing them a favor, really?
Yes.
Nice.
Because I've read the original script and it's not in there on one of those two. So
yeah.
But yeah. Jedi Diester says that there's so many TV shows Marvel could do. He would love to see a Ghost Rider cartoon like the HBO Spawn series. I don't think it will happen. I don't see Disney letting them do anything like that anytime soon. And then that kind of jumps into your bringing this up earlier of how do you feel about Disney owning Marvel? He says, I know it's given Marvel some good things like money, but I also think it slows them down from doing more mature content. Also, what Disney characters would you like to see in the Marvel world, or vice versa? Like, I would love to see a Fantastic Four Incredibles crossover cartoon.
Yeah, that would be pretty sweet. I could see, because the Incredibles are very much an homage to the Fantastic Four in some ways. We talked about it a little bit earlier, like you mentioned, but I don't think it's really hindered Marvel all that much. I know people were worried it would Disneyfy them, and I wonder if maybe it's stopping them from doing a lot of the mature stuff, like for live action wise. But when when Marvel's tried to do the more mature stuff on their own, it's not really worked out that well. I mean, I guess Blade would be the exception to that, because those were successful and I like those movies, but. The Blade TV series was pretty horrible. So when they've tried to go, the Punisher movies haven't been all that successful financially or critically. So I think in a lot of ways, even if Disney didn't own Marvel, I think a lot of them I think they wouldn't be doing those to begin with. Like, look at the Ghost Rider movies. They came out after Disney bought Marvel, and they weren't very successful either. So I think Marvel more so looks at it like, hey, we can't, for some reason at this point in time, the more mature content, they just can't get it for some reason. So they'll stick with their bread and butter, and maybe down the line, or give it to someone else, let them handle it. I would love to see them. The one thing I would love to see is let Pixar and Marvel join forces, like he mentioned, and do something like Pixar Marvel movie. Like, that would be amazing. With their animation and their storytelling ability, it would be such a huge upgrade from the direct-to-DVD movies Marvel has been putting out recently, which have been pretty bad, except for a few exceptions. But I don't know. What do you think? How do you think Disney has affected Marvel?
I think, I think that I agree with pretty much everything you've said. But I also think that adding on to your theory of having Marvel and Pixar working together, you could technically have some CG Marvel films that would kind of put them on par with the DC Universe ones.
Yeah, that would be cool.
And then if they, decided to include, because let's face it, Disney got a lot of things when they acquired Marvel. Not only did they get all of these libraries of characters and continuity and everything else, they also managed to incorporate themselves in a comic company that makes comic books. So when you stop and think about it that way, they could really, I mean, they have that. They have the 3D, animated studios for animation. I mean, there's so many different directions they can go that they can publish their own content, whether it be Disney, Marvel, or Lucasfilm, or any of these other things. There's kind of unlimited potential for crossovers between everything.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so many untapped resources, untapped characters, and I wish they would do something like they did with Blade. Like, look at Blade was a character that no one really cared about. Like, they made a movie out of him, and they completely reimagined that character, and it made him better, and ended up changing the way he was in the comics. I would love to see them do that more often. Take a character that, has potential, and make a movie out of it. I think that would be great. We don't really, I guess they are doing it with something like, though I like the comics Guardians of the Galaxy, where they're taking a huge risk there, going after these characters that many people don't know about. But I also think Guardians of the Galaxy would be an awesome cartoon, just because so many of those characters are unique and very humorous, and there's just this wonderful world they could go to with all these different realities. So maybe if that movie is successful, we can get like a Saturday morning cartoon of it or something like that. So, like you mentioned, the resources are certainly there. So just hope they take advantage of it.
Exactly.
Right.
Plato's Lament says, as podcasters, do you all listen to any other podcasts, and if so, which ones?
Do you listen to any other podcasts besides, of course, Geekcast Radio?
Actually, I do. I listen to Windows Weekly and This Week in Tech. Kind of just depends on the week. From the twit.tv network. I listen to Rob Paulson's Talkin' Tunes, where he talks to other voice actors in the industry that are his friends. Which that's always a fun and entertaining show, and sometimes to the point I end up laughing out loud while I'm at work, which is sometimes awkward.
Yeah, I've been there.
I listen to some shows on This Week in Geek. Mostly they're topic shows, or I re-listen to Future Imperfect, which I'm actually a co-host on, because while I may be coherent and know what I'm talking about on the show, I don't always remember what I've said. So I like to go back and listen. I listen to Voice Acting Mastery by Crispin Freeman, who gives voice acting tips as well in his podcast, more so just from a tips perspective than talking about the overall career of their friends or whatever. There's a few other podcasts I listen to kind of here or there, like some board game podcasts that are local that I found out about through Grand Con. I try and get to other ones. It doesn't always happen. But for the most part, I listen to some shows. Like, I listen to stuff that we produce here, like Windows Weekly, and a lot of our syndicated shows, such as Star Joe's, What's on Joe Mind, Punisher Body Count, and Mark Who 42. So I try and get a little rounded on stuff, even if some of it's not exactly what I would like to listen to as far as the content. Like, I'm not a Doctor Who fan by any means.
Yeah.
I can't get into it. I've kind of tried, and it's one of those things that it's just, I prefer my Trek, and that's pretty much it. But I still listen to it to try and get the grasp of the concept and information behind it, so I'm at least a little bit more educated on it when I'm sitting there trying to disprove why I don't like it. But But I enjoy the podcasts overall that I listen to, mostly because of the banter of the hosts. It's not necessarily the content. I mean, while I do like the content they're talking about, usually I enjoy the interactions between each other.
Yeah, I agree with that, because there's sometimes you may not be into the subject matter all that much, but something about personalities or something like that may attract you more so than like whether the information that they're providing.
Like there's another podcast that I listen to that's called Just Us Geeks, and it's when you say it fast, it sounds like Justice Geeks.
Yeah.
So it's funny. Their podcast, they actually have goofy skits that they do in the show, whether it be to open the show or during the show. Like they've done, making fun of Christian Bale's Batman and Bane at the beginning of the show, or they make fun of Bill Cosby, or, like detective cops, or, it's like these goofy skits that they just come up with, and it's hilarious.
Cool.
Or some of the interactions in there. And I also do occasionally when I get time, I'm able to send in multiple clips, but they do this thing called Deep Thoughts, like the old SNL skit, and I occasionally do those in different voices. I started out doing it as Beast Wars Megatron, which was hilarious. I can't remember if I started doing that for them, or if they started it originally, or if they took over after some of my clips ran out. But they do it with Stephen Hawking, so they have like a recorded system voice that plays out whatever they say, which is a lot of times very funny, because if you're imagining it as Stephen Hawking and the stuff that comes out of this recordings, the way that it comes out, it's awkwardly funny.
Nice.
I've done them as Charlie Sheen, which sometimes they have fun with and change the dialogue where they put beeps in there that aren't in there. But it's funny. So
nice. But yeah, I actually listen to a lot of podcasts, because I have a pretty long drive to work sometimes, and if I'm running or something like that, and just at my job. So I listen to a huge amount. I listen to a lot of, being a movie fan, I listen to a lot of movie podcasts. Some of the bigger ones like Film Spotting, Flash Film Cast, Doug Loves Movies, which is more of a comedy podcast, but that's great. If you're looking for, that's the one too. If you're not a huge movie fan, it doesn't really matter, because it's just rather hilarious. A lot of great guests are on that. I mean, huge, like you get people like John Hamm, and stand-up comedians, different movie people who are in actors and movies and stuff like that. Like Anna Kendrick was on an episode, so that's one of my personal favorites. I also really love How Did This Get Made, the Paul Scheer podcast. I think maybe one of the best podcasts out there right now, where they watch really old, really bad movies and they talk about them.
Nice.
So that's really funny. Thinking also like Film Junk, which is a movie podcast. Comedy Film Nerds. Like I said, a lot of movie podcasts. Also listen to the Geek Generation, which is similar to like what we do here, but they have it's just a geek centric podcast about different topics. It's kind of a roundabout discussion, and they touch upon pretty much everything. If you look at our contributors page, there's a lot of those podcasts are ones I listen to. Super Geeks, or I just got into recently. A lot about geek culture. So many going to. I listen to some sport podcasts too. Like I play fantasy football, so listen to a couple of those, like the Fantasy Focus, and so there's so many podcasts. It's crazy. Nerdist, of course. Nerdist podcast. That's probably one of the first ones I got into. That, and this might be sacrilegious saying this, but I listen to some of the IGN podcasts too, like Keeping It Real and IGN Digigods. If you're a movie collector at all, you enjoy collecting Blu-rays or anything like that, definitely check out the Digigods, because they very extensive breakdown of all upcoming DVD and Blu-ray releases, and they have a lot of insights and stuff like that. It's done by two critics for the LA Film Critics Association, so they know what they're talking about for the most part. But yeah, so a huge amount, really. I mean, probably more than just those are just ones off the top of my head, but that's a cool thing about podcasting, that there's a ton out there. It's free, and you can really find something for any topic. And like you mentioned, even if you're not a big fan of the topic, or it's something you're not completely into, if the people that are doing it are interesting and funny and can keep your interest, that's all that really matters.
Exactly.
So.
Going down the list, Walking Dread brings up, thank you, I 100% agree that Diablo 3 is much better on the 360. I get in some epic arguments with PC gamer friends who refuse to accept the reality. He says, are there any fan or groups of fans that tend to annoy you?
Ooh. Wow, that's a tough question. No, wow. I don't know. Are there any groups of fans that annoy you?
I don't know of any specifically. I mean, I know that there's, like the diehards of whatever. Like, for instance, I myself, like, I hear people argue, oh, I like a PC because of this, or I like Apple because of this, or, I'm PlayStation all the way, or I'm Xbox all the way. I mean, I've heard all the different arguments over the years, but I tend to stay out of them because I'm not well versed in all of them. I mean, granted, I've had some of the various things, or used some of the various things, and I don't have a problem with them. I just stick with what's cheap and what I know. That's mostly what I do. But if we're relating it to like playing a game that's on the PC or on the 360 or a console, I myself, it kind of depends on the game. Like if I'm going to play Command and Conquer or something like that, I prefer to have the mouse and keyboard, because I've tried playing it on the 360 and I got slaughtered. But playing things like Diablo 3 or playing a first-person shooter or a game like the Batman Arkham games, I much prefer to play them on the 360, just because everything's right at my hands and it's easier to control.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine trying to play Arkham City on the computer. I just think that would be really awkward.
I actually had Arkham Asylum for the PC before I ever had a 360.
Oh, really?
I hated it.
Yeah.
My hands hurt so bad because of even with when I changed the button placement, the angles I had to move my hand and fingers and stretch them across the keyboard, especially to like jump, dive, and then I have to grab the mouse with I'm playing both hands on the keyboard, and then I have to let go of part of the keyboard, sacrificing one particular style of movement to grab the mouse to change the camera angle to go back, and it was too much of a headache. And then eventually when I got the 360, I got Arkham City at the same time, and then I eventually went back and bought Arkham Asylum for it, and I couldn't imagine playing it on the PC again. It was terrible on the PC.
Yeah, I'm not this is a question I feel like I'm not all that great at answering, because I'm not a huge gamer either way. I mean, I don't play any games on my PC, mostly because my laptop isn't really, if it's anything bigger than Minesweeper, I don't think it could handle it. But yeah, so I can't really chime in on the PC versus console. I prefer console personally, but I don't really play many games on PC anymore. I mean, I've played like Civilization or Age of Empires and some of those games. I couldn't imagine playing those on console, just like because of the point and click and stuff like that. Like you mentioned, Command and Conquer, I did try to play that on the original Xbox back in the day, and it was more of a hassle than anything. But regarding, are there any fan groups that annoy me? Not really. I mean, yeah, there might be people who are way into something that I'm not into, but I don't know. That's fine. That doesn't really bother me. He mentions like Twilight fans, but I guess you could say that comic book fans, people who aren't comic book fans could look at comic book fans the same way. Only thing that really annoys me is those people who like take things far too seriously, or freak out at everything, or sometimes like geeks can be a little obsessive about things, and like if people almost like if you can't be a comic book fan if you don't know everything about everything. You can't talk about it. Like you have to know. You're just trying to like. There's a big thing now where geeks are kind of going after people because they think that they're just faking being a geek. Like especially like girls, like famous. I can't think of her name, but I remember there's this famous anchor who's on a lot of the video game stuff, and people are going after her because they're saying, you're not really into video games, you're just doing this to try to become famous, but she really is. And I think that type of stuff does bother me, when people try to question other people and saying, hey, you're not really into this like I am. So and I guess you kind of have that in any type of fandom.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of wrong that they do that. I mean, it seems like it's kind of abnormal for especially they hit like the obscenely gorgeous women that happen to like gaming, or happen to like comics, or happen to like cosplay, or all this stuff, and they're like, oh, you're just trying to be get attention because of the sex of it and everything else, which that's an entirely different subject that I'm not going to get into in full detail here, but unless it's asked. But I personally, I don't see anything wrong with it. I mean, if that's how they portray their cosplay, or that kind of stuff, or whatever, or they're trying to stay true to the character or whatever, I mean, good for them. That's what they're enthusiastic about. And I think that it's kind of wrong that people pigeonhole people into being or try and say that they're fake geeks just because they don't know their background. It's kind of that would be like me saying, oh, you're a terrible movie critic because you don't like all of the DC Comics films, which that's kind of slight spoiler of the top 100, but but I mean, you have different film tastes than I do, so obviously you're going to disagree in certain areas where I'm going to disagree in certain areas too. So I mean, it's not it doesn't make you any less of a film buff because you don't like a certain set of films, or I don't like a certain set of films. It's
very true.
Everybody has their own personal tastes and their own likes, and but I can definitely see where you get the haters on both sides of the coin there, of that are just doing it just to be asses, more or less.
Exactly. Like I was, New York Comic Con was I think last weekend or 2 weekends ago, and they had some photos of like the cosplayers, and I was reading, like I made the mistake and read some of the comments of like the girl cosplayers, and it was some of the most vile stuff. Like it was so unnecessary. It was like on Facebook. I'm like, why would people write this? It was just mean. I'm not going to even bother quoting people, but I just didn't. And it's unfair to single out geeks, because sports culture is the same way. I mean, you could probably pick it to any fandom and they have the same problem. But I think geek culture is a little bit more sensitive to it recently because it's become so popular. It's gone from being the outcast to being the the go-to, becoming like the norm. So I think there's some apprehension there. So, but yeah, like you said, people have different opinions. I don't get why people are so caught up in making sure that, or so caught up in what other people think and what other people like. It just seems weird to me.
I mean, it's like more or less do what you enjoy. It's not
very true.
You don't have anybody really to answer to but yourself. I mean, if you keep honest with yourself and do it because you love it, people will respect you for it. And if they don't, then they're just being a troll.
Exactly. Yeah, like I said, don't feed the trolls. Just let them be.
Yes, don't feed them. They grow and multiply.
Especially after midnight, because then I could just. But yeah, so do we have any other feedback?
King of Kong says, fill in the blank question. I like it. He says, what to ask? Well, what made you become geeks, or what brought you into the vacuum that is geek culture?
Wow, that's a tough question. Gotta research your memory banks for that one. How about you? What brought you into becoming a geek, as they say?
I've had kind of a very diverse background in it. From the early days of watching my first film in the theater of Batman, the Mask of the Phantasm, which I still hold. I hold that to be one of the greatest original DC animated film ever.
Yeah, I don't deny that at all. I agree with you there.
It's the only one that's ever had a theatrical release. But it's also that film for me, and I'm sure at some point, I'm hoping anyway, that it shows up in the top 100, and I can talk more about it there. But
I'm sure it will.
I really hope that it's because I think that at least that film, and I think it deserves to be in the top 20 anyway, even if it's not in the top 10 or close to in the top 5. I still hope that it's in the top 20, just because that's one of the most original origin stories of Batman, without kind of delving too much into his parents got shot, this, but it also shows kind of the evolution of the character. It shows him growing into the role. It shows him having, love and all that. There's multiple layers to that film that you didn't see in animated films around that time of superhero anyway, and some of them you still don't.
Yeah, I think too, that was the best portrayal of the character of Batman, just all of his complexities and everything like that. I love the Dark Knight and all those, but I think those movies aren't great because of the character of Batman. Batman Mask of the Phantasm is great because it is completely his story with some other subplots. So anyways, you were saying?
But yeah, I mean, that was the kind of start of it. That spawned me into getting into Batman, which I got into that. I got into Ninja Turtles. I got into Star Trek. Some of it because my parents got me into it. Some of it because I got into it myself. I was huge into the toys. I got into comics heavily in that time. I always loved watching films. My favorite film as a kid was between Mask of the Phantasm and Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country.
Really?
Yes.
That's interesting.
I loved that movie. I watched that movie so much. The VHS tape always had to do the tracking. The where it would auto filter it and clean it up.
Oh yeah, I forgot all about tracking. Man, I do not miss those days.
No, I don't either. I almost forgot about it, and then I was like, oh yeah, I remember having to do that all the time because the tape was so worn, and then the cover to the VHS was battered and peeling at the ends because I watched it so much. But those two were my favorite films growing up as a kid, and then of course I watched just about every animated superhero cartoon, whether it was DC or Marvel, and I kind of got into the whole. I pretty much watched just about every animated cartoon in the 90s.
Yeah,
it didn't really. It wasn't even just superhero related. I kind of watched everything, and I'm still somewhat to that point. Like I'll at least try some of the shows before I say, to hell with it, I don't care. And but those mostly sparked it, and then in the 2000s I think is really when it kind of pushed off with the internet and everything, because you find out, hey, there's more people like me. And I built my first website and everything, and that it kind of pigeonholed into the of course the origins through my amateur voice acting stuff, which again led to this. So I mean, it's kind of continual building block of one thing led to another, and then it's continuously growing.
Yeah, it is. It is this beast that has become uncontrollable, for sure.
So what has caused you to come to this level?
I think similar to you, my gateway drug was a lot of the comic book cartoon series of the 90s. The one I kind of point to the most is the X-Men cartoon. I think that really got me further into comics easily. I mean, that like opened this entire new world to me that I just wanted to learn more and more about. And then the Batman cartoon series and the Spider-Man cartoon series, like I loved all of them. No, not all of them. I mean, there are some bad ones in there, like the Spider-Man Unlimited and stuff like that. But all of course, a big one would be Star Wars movie. I mean, that probably was one of the biggest movies that helped me grow my love for movies. And then two, Jurassic Park is one I go to as. I remember seeing that movie as a kid, and like that is one of those movies that like immediately I fell in love with it. A kid of that age who's really into dinosaurs, seeing them come alive on screen, it to me was like the power of movies. And I remember buying that movie and owning it on VHS and just loving I loved everything about it. I loved the logos. I loved the color scheme of the vehicles. It was just this awesome world that I couldn't get enough of. But I've kind of gotten back and forth. Like, I don't know about you, but I've kind of gotten stages with my geekdom. Like, I'd be really into comics for a while, or then I'd go into, like, for a big part of my life, I kind of got out of comics and got really into, like, wrestling, like WWE and WCW. That was, like, a huge thing for me. I don't know if you would consider that geeky.
Well, I think I'd consider that geeky. I mean, I used to jump back and forth between, like, I just recently got back into comics, like, in the last 2 years. Before that, I had been out of it so long that I actually was reading them all, catching up online and reading wikis and trying to get back into the know. And then, of course, the New 52 happened, and I was like, oh, perfect opportunity to start a clean slate. And then, I mean, I'm familiar with the WCW days and NWO days back before it went WWE. When they had, like, Macho Man and, like, all those guys that were great back in the day. So, I mean, I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, I remember, like, that Monday Night War going on, like, the Nitro and, what was it, Raw, and, like, going back and forth. I was more into WCW than I was a Raw fan, so I was very sad when WCW folded. That was kind of getting kind of bad near the end there. But yeah, that was a big thing I was into for a long period of time. I mean, I always stuck to a lot of the comic book stuff. I didn't really read many of the comics, but I was a big collector of the action figures, and also, into the movies and video games. Like, I was much more a video gamer back in the day. Like 64 and Dreamcast were probably my favorite systems as a kid. When I played the most games, back when you can, like, rent games from Blockbuster, which I miss, because I wouldn't buy many games. I would just rent them, and and sometimes I'd be like, I should just bought this game because I've rented it like 4 or 5 times. So I don't know why I just don't buy it. But yeah, so that's kind of what got me into it. And then what really got me into movies probably was podcasting more so. I was always a movies fan, but getting into podcasting, like, took it to another level. I began to learn more and more about movies I knew nothing about, getting into, a wider range of films. So that really spurred that as I got into podcasting, and that got into podcasting more and more. And that I see myself, that is more of what I'm into now than anything. I never read comics here and there, but it's mostly movies, and I barely play video games anymore. I want to, but I think part of it, I think I would play them more if I could. I like, even as a kid, I didn't like buying games for some reason. I just because of how expensive they were. First, I don't know. I guess I'm cheap. I'm more cheap with my own stuff, like stuff I get for myself, than stuff I get for other people. But yeah, I think for me it's just a variety of different things. So I don't know.
I can relate to the being cheap thing, only because back in the day I had to sell off just about everything I owned as a kid, whether it be comics or action figures, to pay for things as simple as getting gas to go to work.
Oh yeah.
Because I'd blow my paychecks on toys or DVDs or games because I wanted them, and that was simple enough. And I since I've been living with my wife, she has helped curb my my spending, which again, that kind of points back to an earlier episode of AGU that she's kind of made me have to think about it and justify it before going out and purchasing it. Like I just bought War for Cybertron or Fall of Cybertron Transformers for the 360, and it came out August of 2012.
Yeah.
And I really wanted it at the time, but I had a choice. I had to choose, because I really only buy one new game a year, if I buy one new at all. And last year I bought Diablo 3 for the PC. And that was the game I spent $60 on. So I really couldn't ask for another game. So and she knows I play the hell out of them once I buy them, so it's not that big of a deal, but I couldn't bring myself to spend $60 on a game I knew I was going to beat in a matter of probably 8 to 10 hours.
Yeah.
So, fast forward to a year and a couple months later, I bought it probably 2-3 weeks ago. I beat it within 7 days of playing it for 2-hour blocks. And I've actually beat it 3 times now. Now that everything's upgraded and I can decimate people without losing any life. But I only spent $28 on it. So nice. I spent half the cost to enjoy the game a year later, which, yeah, it kind of sucks it's a year later, but I still get to play it. So, and I'm going to run into the same dilemma when Arkham Origins comes out. I think it came out, or comes out... I think it comes out the day that this is actually being released.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I saw on Twitter that a lot of people were talking about it,
and I really want the game. Don't get me wrong, but I don't want to spend $60.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna probably wait till Black Friday and try and swipe it then, because then I can get it for $30.
Yeah, that's a good thing right now. I mean, we're not that far away from it, so it does make sense to take your time. But yeah, I'm similar to that too, where my wife has helped me curtail my spending on things, and she'll be like, do you really need that? Like, but I just sometimes you just kind of catch her in the right mood, or be like, if she knows I really love something, I'm really into it, like she knew I was going to buy Pacific Rim on Blu-ray. She's like, she accepted that, and so she's, I don't know if maybe it's a guy thing, but for her, she barely buys anything for herself at all, so it's like it's hard to like justify it. She's always like, I don't, but yeah, that's always been kind of tough, is wanting so much but realizing that you can't have it all. And how expensive things get. It's just like, oh, I want this, I want so much of it. Like I wish I could just win a shopping spree and go off and like get all this stuff. But I fantasize that by very often, like winning a shopping spree into like a movie store or something like that, and just going crazy. But you just kind of have to be smart about it. And I've learned patience as a movie buyer, waiting for deals, looking for deals, buying used, knowing stores that I know I can get things for cheaper. So like I very rarely spend more than $15 on a Blu-ray, just because I just, there's certain spots like around here that I know I can go to that will have them cheap really quickly. So I'm like, all right, I can wait a few weeks and know I can get it for $10 if I have to wait a week or two. But yeah, so, but, and then too, I think what's kind of been awesome is Amazon Prime and all the amazing stuff you can find on there for really good prices and not having to pay for shipping. So, I can definitely see that. I'm personally trying to, I missed out when Star Trek Into Darkness came out on Blu-ray. Only, I mean, I can still pick it up. I refuse to spend $26 on a Blu-ray. Yeah, I picked up the one from Walmart because they had it's kind of sad, but they had like a statue of not the Enterprise, but the other ship.
The Vengeance.
Yeah, the Vengeance. And it was a steelbook, and I love steelbooks so much. And they tend to, those are things I will spend a little bit extra money on because they're limited and then go away really quickly. So I did kind of fork over the cash for that one. But that's a rarity. But
Like, I missed out on it when it came out at Walmart. I figured out it came out the week after it came out. So it went back up to its regular pricing. So now I have to wait until I can find, because I like getting I'm kind of glad the Blu-ray comes with the DVD. I don't so much care about the digital copy. I like having where I have the DVD, because then if I need to, I can rip the DVD to my PC so I can watch it elsewhere. But I like having the Blu-ray because a sci-fi movie like that needs to be on Blu-ray, in my opinion, because you get the best quality picture. So I like getting the combo discs, but I don't want to spend more than $19. So
I could understand that. I can relate very much so.
And I think that... Oh, and then King of Kongs also brings up... he says later in his comments, I checked out the Tomorrow People as well. I agree, a million times better than he likes it a million times better than S.H.I.E.L.D. And then he says, do you watch Arrow before it on CW? I don't know. Have you ever seen Arrow?
I watched a little bit of the first episode, but I stopped there. It just came on Netflix, so I actually kind of want to go back and watch it, but I have not really watched that show. Have you?
I'm not as much of a diehard on CW as like TFT1 Mike. He liked Smallville when it was on until it got dragged on for 10 seasons, and he was kind of like, I'm done. The only show I really watch on there, I've watched Whose Line Is It Anyway? I've watched Supernatural, which I really love now that they're kind of back. But Arrow was kind of like, I never liked Smallville. I tried watching it. I watched the whole first season and I still didn't like it. But Arrow, I liked it initially, and then it kind of, I don't know, it kind of dragged for me, because I stopped watching it about 7 episodes in, and I didn't revisit it until it went season 2 recently. And now that it's in season 2, I actually like it again. But technically, you don't actually have to watch most of the first season to watch the second season, because it explains what happens in the last... I mean, you could probably watch the beginning, a couple of miscellaneous episodes in between, and then watch the season finale, and then go to season 2, and you'll be fine, I would think. But I could be wrong. I just found season 1 to be kind of lacking, and season 2 is kind of actually dealing with the story and the characters a little bit more. Whereas it seemed almost villain of the week for the first season.
Interesting. Yeah, one of my best friends is a big fan of that series, so he's had good things to say. So I do want to go back and check it out. But regarding the Tomorrow People, I think that's the only show on CW I watch, just because I feel so old watching that network. Like, anyone over the age of 18 is looked at like an ancient person.
Yeah, but, I get that vibe too.
Yeah, but I do like the Tomorrow People. I taped the first episode. I'm like, okay, I'll see how this is, and I'm like, wow, this is actually pretty good. And then the second episode was good too. I haven't checked out this week's episode yet, but I was impressed with it, and I think I tweeted about it. But I thought the production value in that is so much better than that of S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D. to me has become what I call a background show, one of those shows I'll throw on TV while I'm doing other things. Just which is kind of not the best way to watch something, but I don't know. It's okay. I don't hate it. There's some good things to it. It has gotten better with each episode, but it just, I don't know. It's still somewhat of a disappointment for me. But anyways, But yeah, like you said, I haven't watched Supernatural. My wife has. She's a big fan of that. I've watched like a few episodes secondhand, but I've enjoyed what I saw. And the only other CW show I have any experience with is probably Vampire Diaries, because my wife's a fan of it too. So a lot of those shows, like I don't watch like myself. I more so they're on TV while I'm working on something else, like writing a review or something. So, yeah, just like I said, CW just makes me feel like an old person.
Yeah, I get that same vibe when I watch it. The only shows I really watch, like I said, are those three. The Tomorrow People looks interesting, but I'll probably catch it when I see it on Netflix.
Yeah, I think that's fine. It's not anything amazing, but I think you'd like it.
I have like so many shows I watch between all the networks right now that I can't keep up.
Yeah.
So I think I'll save some of them for the Netflix end of seasons, and watch them then.
Yeah. Sometimes that's like the better way to watch TV. I think is depending on the shows, the marathoning. I think it. To me, like watching Game of Thrones is so much better when you can marathon it than watching it from week to week, just because it plays like a 6 or 7 hour movie. But yeah, I think that's fine. I think that it's not something I would say like, oh, you have to watch it every week. But maybe when it comes out on Netflix, check it out and see what you think.
I like a couple of shows that I've watched that have been really good that we kind of blitzed through on Netflix. Like I've seen my wife and I watched Prison Break. I don't know if you ever saw that before.
No, I have not.
It's actually really well written, and the continuity is pretty solid, and all the details between episodes is pretty solid. So far as like when somebody gets hurt, they're not magically healed by the next episode. They still have part of the injury. I mean, okay. They keep every little detail intertwined, and every season seems to tackle different things, but that show is so deep in its own continuity that it's mind-boggling sometimes. It's one of the few Fox shows that I can say that I really enjoyed. But we kind of watched the whole series and blitzed through it on Netflix. Because we never caught it on cable. And then we've done that with like the Sci-Fi Channel's Continuum, which has to do with like fugitives from a rebellion in the future that get sent back in time when they're supposed to be executed through some kind of a portal thing, and it sends a cop back with them, and they're supposed to, like, these fugitives are trying to alter the future.
Okay.
And this cop's supposed to try and stop it. But then they're figuring out that some of this was predetermined and pre-set up in the future to try and change things on purpose, or to some degree. So I mean, it's an interweaving plot in that too, and that's had 2 seasons, and it's going on a third in 2014. So that show looks really good too. But I mean, I guess it almost leads to a question too, though. Are there shows that you would like to watch, but you would prefer to just blitz through them on things like Netflix, or I mean, I would kind of say that. I mean, that's...
Yeah, I mean, those shows that are better consumed in large chunks than on a week-to-week basis. I think there are shows like that I think watching... I think you can... Some shows that having that week anticipation makes it even better, just because you can't wait for the next episode. But then there are those shows that do play so much better if you can watch it. You know, especially those shows that are more like cinematic, where, like you said, I guess maybe that's the case with like Prison Break, where things are so related from episode to episode. Like something that I think would be a good example of a show that is great. The marathon would be like 24, because of it's just this really long continuous story, so being able to kind of assume that in a quick manner, because they're, you know, but then there's those shows that are so deep and are they can have so much to them that having a week to just kind of think about it and analyze it can be helpful. So yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I'm sure there's different opinions out there.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely one that just kind of was top of my mind right there.
Yeah.
Ryan Cox 20 on Twitter says, "Can't wait for the new Arkham game." He says he started collecting the comic of the Arkham games.
Oh, really? That's cool. I didn't know they had a comic.
Yeah, it's it's not called Arkham City. It's like Arkham Unleashed or something like that. I can't remember the exact title of it, or Arkham Unhinged, I think is what it is. But it's it takes place through the Arkham Asylum. Like they did some Arkham Asylum stuff. They did kind of the prequel to Arkham City, and then they went through Arkham City. It tells the story of throughout the game, so, and then some of after, I believe. I myself didn't care to collect it, but that's because I played the game.
Yeah.
But I've glanced at them. They aren't that bad. They definitely pull directly from stuff from the game, so it's but they add a little bit more depth to it, whereas some of the story in the games are lacking. But he says he enjoyed the first chapter and from the game, and it compelled him to get the comic.
Very cool.
Yes. So, I don't know. I think we've kind of intermingled topics all in there.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I think we'll cut it a little short. Do you have any kind of specific questions you'd like to ask the listeners?
Well, geez. I guess, like you said, I guess we can continue with that question. Is like how we just in MR Weekly we talked about. Our question for last week was, how do you consume your movies, theaters, and whatnot? So maybe since we were talking about television, like how do you consume your television? Are you a weekly watcher? Are you a marathoner? Like, how do you do that? Like, how do you prefer to watch a television series? And are there specific series that you think are enhanced by watching it on a week-to-week basis or watching it in a large chunk? I know that's kind of a wordy question, but
that's okay. It'll go in the post.
Yeah, I basically how do you prefer to watch your television, to simplify it?
And I'll tack two other ones in there from the buffer that I've created today. In addition to thinking I lost this entire scripted document, I opened it in the temp folder from Dropbox earlier today, and I was editing it, and then I hit save, and then I didn't realize that I didn't save it to my flash drive.
Oh, geez.
And I was like, I just edited this whole thing. I hope I didn't lose it. And I'm searching, and then finally I find it in this particular temp folder. Don't even know how I stumbled across it. Oh yeah, that's right. It showed up in my download log. I couldn't even find it on the computer itself, and I managed to pull it up, and I'm like, oh, thank God. But
yeah, that's the the agony of losing something, but then the relief of realizing it's still there. That's I've done that many times with like a review I've been writing, and I'm like working on it, and then I accidentally X out of it, and I'm like, I just lost that work I've been doing for the last 3 hours, but luckily sometimes I find it. But there have been times when I had to go back and reread it and redo it again. Those are days I am not proud of.
Yes. I will tack on two questions from the buffer as well to that one. The first being, what is your opinion of what is wrong with cartoons today? As we kind of stated with the Saturday morning and shows kind of getting canned before they really get going.
Yeah.
And then, do you think comic-based fiction has lost or are losing their appeal?
So is that comic book fiction, any type of comic book fiction like
TVs,
whether it's movies?
Yeah, whether it be through animation, whether it be through the comic itself, whether it's through through television film, whatever, kind of like, Walking Dead, or like the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., or like the various Marvel films or DC films, just in general, the characters and content they're in.
Okay. Yeah, those are some good questions. So I'm looking forward to listening next week and seeing how people responded.
Yes, definitely. So we will cut this short. So thanks as always for joining us here on Altered Geek Unlimited. You can contact us in the following ways. Call the voicemail line, 502-526-5821. You can email us, feedback@geekcastradio.com. You can visit the forums and episode post at geekcastradio.com. You can visit the Facebook fan page by searching Geekcast Radio Network. You can contact on Twitter at GeekCastRadio, #AlteredGeek. My Twitter handle is at SCP21, and yours is?
At MovieRevolt.
So, as always, get altered, get geeky with the Altered Geeks. See you next time.
Boil 'em, mash 'em, stick 'em in the stew.